related, but obviously technical user group and all that starting this year. What a record turnout, so thank you very much for that. We've got a couple of presentations tonight, one from our very own Kern, Technical Services Director, about the Item Web API, and then one from Nick. All right, Nick, what are you talking about tonight, Nick?
Page editor.
Page editor, great stuff. So please keep yourself fueled with beer and wine and soft drinks from the bar. There may be some tidbits of food. Other than that, Kern. Right.
Wait. I'll just see how it turns out. So, yeah, Sitecore Item Web API. What is it? It's a REST API for querying and manipulating Sitecore items. It talks JSON and is used by Sitecore's mobile API that was released at the same time as Sitecore 6.6. It's not a native MVC4 web API. It's just a little cheat in the naming there. Makes you think it is. But it behaves very much the same way, using the HTTP verb to sort of decide what you're doing with the API. Before we start, I think we should just cover there are some security considerations when you deploy the Item Web API. If you do anything read-write, obviously you would want to use authentication and encryption. Also, the documentation states that if you do deploy this on a content delivery server, you should use advanced security, read-only mode, and not allow anonymous access. I think I'll go a little bit further than that, but that's for another talk, I think. To get started with the Item API, download a standard Sitecore package from SDN. It's super easy to install. Just remember to go to the very last page of the documentation where it tells you how to turn it on. In the configuration file for the API, there is a switch, and by default it's set to off for obvious reasons. And it has two other settings. When you enable it, you can enable it in either the standard security mode or an advanced security mode. Advanced security meaning there is an additional access right in Sitecore called field remote read, and it has the opposite default of other access rights in Sitecore. That is, it will default to deny, and you can use it to control what fields are actually available when you access items with the API. This is an overview of the operations that you can do with the Item API. You can read one or multiple items. You can do create, update, or delete on items. And there are some special request hooks. I will cover those in the end. Right. Querying with this Sitecore Item API. Can everyone see the stuff in grey? When you've enabled the API, you can access it on /item/v1/ and then from there on you start specifying what it is that you want to do. And this is very much like all the big REST APIs that we all use for Twitter and Google and I don't know. Well, so it's very familiar if you've used any of those APIs, but is anyone using REST APIs? It's one person, there's at least 3 people here that know what I'm talking about. So it's pointless to ask if you do it with Sitecore, I guess. You are all familiar with the concept, I take it. Sort of. Think Twitter. That's the one everyone uses anyway. So I'll put some examples of how to select items, and as you can see, you can. The first example here will select the Sitecore root item. The next example will select the Sitecore root item, and the third example here will use a Sitecore fast query to select the The fourth example is a lot different because that selects all the children of the Sitecore item. And all of these are done with HTTP GET. And there are some additional parameters you can send when you send off a query. So you can specify an SC item, which is an item ID, the version of the item that you want back, the database you want to look in, language, oddly not prefixed by SC. I don't know what I guess perhaps to avoid confusion with SC lang. The difference between the language parameter here and using SC lang is that SC lang will set a cookie. So if you are actually in a browser, that will stick. The language parameter does not set a cookie and is stateless. And there's an example down here at the bottom. I guess it's pretty obvious. Selecting version 2 of some random item in the master database and in Danish. You can set the language to default, and that means the default of the site. And again, this is to do with if you are using this from a browser. If you've set language, then that sticks in your cookie. Right. Some other parameters you can set. Of course, doing all this REST business is about doing some services that are slender, and you can decide how much you're going to fetch on each request. So you can use the payload parameters to do like broad, either very little, medium, or a lot, everything, including the kitchen sink. If you're very specific, you can use the fields parameter, and that will override anything you put in payload. And it can be a mixture of field names and IDs, and just do a pipe delimited list. And those are then the fields that we get back together with some base information about the item. And one more slide on parameters. This one is actually the most interesting one, scope. Scope applies to most of the operations that you do with the API, and you can set it to the default is self. So if you ask for /Sitecore/content, then it's the content item that's given back. If you set the scope to P for parent, then you get the Sitecore node. If you set to children, I guess you will get where you're going with this. You can also do a combination of, any combination of these parameters. So if you say scope S pipe C pipe, which one do I get? P, then you get parent, self, and children. If you do a query that targets multiple items, so say Sitecore /*, and you set the scope to P, then you'll get 5 Sitecore nodes returned in your. So does that make sense to you? We can try it. I can see there's a little flash on my screen here. That means that I should do a little demo for you. And I'll do that here. There we are. So this is a vanilla Sitecore, and let's first do it like this. User group. You can see what I've been doing all day. Let's do it like this. My first example was Sitecore. Wonder if it's awake. Oh dear, something went wrong. Demo fail. Of course, I didn't go in and change the configuration. I just wanted to show you that when you do a clean install, it's like it isn't there. You just get a 404. And this was part of the demo. People are laughing. We'll just do something that probably won't fly in your production environment. Standard security read-only, anonymous access, yes. So let's go back here and see what Chrome says. So this is JSON. For those of you who know how JSON looks, that makes sense. As you can see, I asked for the. Can you all see it? Move around, move the pole. So I asked for the. Can I zoom in? Yes, I can. Can everyone see from now? Is it a question of size here? Whoops. There we are.
Now we can.
Yes, use the scroll wheel, someone once told me. There we are. So, as you can see, I got a little bit of information, status code 200, meaning everything was fine. In the result, there's a total count and a result count. It says there was one item here, and you will recognize with the ID that it's the root node of Sitecore. So, would anyone like to see something queried, something from the Sitecore database? You could interact a little bit here.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah, we can do that. Can anyone remember what the parameter was? No. Let's go. Equals. See, there we are. And I can see that we've got the content node, the layout node, media library. I could also spruce this up a bit and put on the parent, and then somewhere along here we should have the apparently not. I take that back. Are there any other queries that we should venture into? Anything you think would be exciting to do? Otherwise I'm just going to move on. Any of the parameters you want demonstrated? We could do a little bit of oh, sorry. I can't see it on my screen, that's why I keep looking up here. So you can see if I ask for the Sitecore item and do a full payload, I get all the standard fields that are normally excluded. And if I do a minimal sort of toothbrush and credit card, I only get the very basic information. Right. I think we'll move back to the slides. There we are. Right. What was the note on here? Okay, yeah. The default for scope is, of course, self. The next thing you can do with the API is, of course, manipulating items. And as I said to begin with, the important thing here is to do authentication and also encryption. So encryption could be running the requests over HTTPS. Or using, say, encryption for the credentials. And there's a mechanism in the Item API for doing just that. And I have created a little demo. I think the browser probably won't suffice for this. So let's just start by changing the requirements for site. We'll do like this. As you can see here, actually, that's a good point. This is in the Item API configuration file, which is in the Sitecore app config include. So we actually just add a couple of parameters on the website, and that could be any of your sites. So this is just the default when you have a vanilla Sitecore install. You could have website 1, website 2, I don't know what you call your websites, but so that's a way to target which of the websites has the Item API enabled. Also, when you are using authentication, the user will be a user on the domain for that site that we're targeting. And I think we'll just have a look here. I've got a little program. This is just a little console program that I wrote to show you some of my examples. I'm already commenting stuff out. This is brilliant. It's part of the demo. So, an example of how to authenticate. Can everyone see this, or is the text too small? The role is nodding his head. So sorry about that. Do like this. That didn't help. Oh, like that. Whoop. Is that a bit too much? So I've created a test method here called get home item. I do a create web request. I'm just going to slide the screen here a little bit. It accesses the item API and tries to get the home item. The important bit is actually here. You can see I set request headers for our well-known credentials that no one uses in production, right? Nervous laughter out there, people frantically checking. Did you fix this? And basically just doing a response and writing out the JSON to the console. So I think, I guess it's important to note here that these credentials are being sent clear text, so as it's an HTTP request, it's probably not optimal security. You would be able to do this just fine if it was over HTTPS. I didn't set up HTTPS, not for you guys. Yeah, so shall we see if that how that sort of runs? We'll do a spins up console, waits a little bit, and then it basically does exactly what we did in Chrome before. And perhaps it's a valid point just to go into Chrome and do like this and see that actually I can't do it without authentication parameters. I can do it with. I guess this is the easy example of doing the authentication. What I find slightly harder was doing the RSA authentication. There wasn't in the documentation. It basically just said, get the public key and do RSA authentication. Best of luck with that. So I took some time putting this example together. So you guys, when you go home, you can download this example and see exactly what was done. That's also why I haven't optimized these examples. I'll put it in there so you can see step by step what's actually going on. So the first bit is, as I said in the documentation, run off and get the public key. And this is one of these special request hooks that is available in the item API called get public key. And that will respond with some XML that contains the information you need. And when you want to actually encrypt something with it, it was as simple as these 4 lines. Okay, I have compressed this one. This is a beautiful one-liner. I pity whoever takes this over. But you can see what's going on. Get bytes out of the data string, encrypted. The RSA provider that has been spawned here, it's been configured with the XML string, and then turn it into base 64. Off we go. And up here, instead of just passing the clear text, I then encrypted. So I thought it was worth wasting your time with these 4 lines because I spent a little bit longer coming up with them. And I guess I'll risk another demo fail. Let's just go in here and see if it actually works. So the bit is on me if it comes back with the item as it's supposed to. Well, actually it's on Sitecore, but I'll claim the fame for that. Hey, it's actually very fast this time. It's almost as if I was cheating. Should we just try that one more time? No, it's just a very fast laptop I have here. So, right. Then I have some examples around creating, updating, and deleting items. I think important things to understand is that when you create items, it's on the you use the post verb. Updating, you use put, and deleting, you use delete. So just have a quick browse through some of my examples here. You can see that for my create example, I use the request method post, and for the create, I didn't send any information. So it's just an empty post. For my delete example, I do a method delete, and for update, it's put. And in the update, I actually do send some information. I send the post information as x www form URL encoded, and that's basically, it looks like a query string that you just send as the post information. I do still send some stuff on the query string, and in this case, I'm sending the scope children, so I want to affect the children of home. I'm just going to move back to the create, so you can see there's actually some meaning to this. First, under home, I'm going to create an item named something based on the template something else, and then I'm going to update the children of home, so the item I've just created, and any other items on that level, setting field whatever to some value, and the last bit of the example will then go and delete children of home. So the scope here is the important bit. It's a bit out of kilter, but I guess we'll get it. Right. So let's see if we can actually make this work. I've done this a couple of times before, so I'm a good 75% confident that it's going to work. So I'll just put in some breakpoints. Right. So first breakpoint. I guess it is worth. Can I? I can't see out on the end here. Sorry. We'll do like this. Sitecore Explorer. There we are. I just need this guy for a second. This is the user group. We are actually working in the web database because I'm just hooked up to the website definition, and that's of course tied to the web database. And under content home, there's nothing. So go back here, and I should be able to step through, say F10. It's on to the next line, and over under home, say refresh, and it's beautiful. That's a child item. You can see that's actually what I specified here, child item based on sample item. And as I'm going to, well, let's just have a look at it. Does anyone here use Sitecore Rux? Yeah, there's one very eager guy down at the end there who may be talking about Sitecore Rux in an upcoming user group. You know, I'm not talking about you, Raoul, that's someone else. One of the users, you know. You can see the title is currently child item. That's a default based on the template. In the console you can see it's answering back with the REST content of the equivalent of doing a lookup. So when you create the item, it gives you back what you just created, which is more or less an empty item, except that it has the value child and title. Right. I'm just going to go into program and then step over the next one here. So now we've updated the field. hopefully. Have a look here. And you can, it's very nifty, you can just right click and say reload. You can see now it's got a new title. Can everyone see this? Or should we just use the scroll wheel for once? There we are. And close this. The last step of the exercise was to delete the children at home and just wait for some input. And you can see the last, this was the result from the update, and you can see that there's a new title, and the last bit is a result saying these are the item IDs that we've just deleted. We can go into rocks and refresh home, and it's gone, which is brilliant, because then I don't have to do any cleanup before the user group in Bristol tomorrow. So, right. I will just move back to my slides. It's not all demo, where I've actually spent a lot of time on my slides. And where were we? Yes. So special request hooks. It sounds promising, and I'm afraid to disappoint you, there's only two. There's the get public key that we've already used, and then there's an interesting one, which is get rendering HTML, which does exactly that. So you point it to a rendering and an item, and get back some HTML. Do you want to see it in action, or do you believe me? Someone said action. Yeah. Okay. We'll have a look at it. I'm just moving back into here. Let's see a look here. We'll turn off all the security one more time. Who needs security? Oh, that's the wrong one. Is this one a little bit in the way now? Good, good. And we'll just give it a chance to wake up whilst I find the query. I didn't memorize this one. I actually had to put it in here. And one of them is broken. I think this is the right one. There we are. Okay, so get rendering HTML. This is the rendering. The ID here points to the sample rendering, and the item ID is the home node. So not surprising, it looks a lot like what you have in here. I guess it's up to you guys what you think you could use that for. I could think of a couple of examples, but I guess these are the two request hooks that we have available, one for rendering HTML and one for getting the public key. And let's go back to slideshow. So the last point I wanted to talk about was extending the pipelines. This is a common theme with Sitecore, and the Item Web API is no different. Everything has been put into pipelines, so all the logic that's being run. Some of the pipeline steps are put into the regular flow of the Sitecore HTTP request and end request. And there are also some dedicated requests that will be interesting for anyone doing something with the Item Web API. So firstly, there's the general API request, which is the one that sort of delegates to all the specific pipelines, such as API read, API create, API delete, API update, and a few other ones for getting fields and stuff if we really need to dig deep and change the way it behaves. And surprise, surprise, I've created a little demo of something I thought could perhaps be fun to put into the pipelines. So I will just go out of slideshow mode, and I guess we can leave the security largely off, because what I actually wanted to look at was, I initially talked about Twitter, and I've used the API many times. Sometimes I've done horrible things like calling the XML directly from an XSLT into a REST. And Twitter quickly caught on to what I was doing and introduced this limit of how many requests I was allowed per hour. Has it happened to you guys? So I think you allowed sort of like 100 requests per hour. And I quickly racked them up. So what they're doing is they're throttling my usage of their API. And I'm sure if I paid them enough money, they would open up and I could have all I could eat. So I thought, how about we try and introduce some throttling in the item API. And I'm still I need something here. I need to view my solution explorer. There we are. Oh yeah, apropos, I managed to get my pizza picture into the presentation. Not very appropriate for here. I'll show you that afterwards. Have I got time for that? Yeah, I'm good. Yes, I did an extension for the Item Web API and included in my user group website in the Item Web API request. So I think just by the way that this is named and the way that it includes a red, this appears at the top of the request pipeline. That was my intention anyway. And my request throttle has some parameters. It says something about an interval and minimum response interval. So this is all in milliseconds. 10 seconds here, and I want it, on average I want 1 second in between. And you can see here's a process method that will ask average response interval less than minimum, and if it is, then it'll say your request limit has been, I'll just close this again. Well, your request limit has been exceeded, and this is all based on some very doubtful moving average algorithm implemented by yours truly. I'm sure you can have a look at my GitHub repository and just send the flame mails from there. But I've enabled this on the website, and I've come up with a way to test it. I should have done this as unit tests, I guess. I don't know. Console was before that in the list of projects, so this is what we have. Let's get rid of these guys. Oh. So, where did the mouse go? There we are. Turn these off here. And go down to the business end. So, here we are. This is a typical way for me to build websites. Do some loops and do some, get some items and put in some sleep so the users won't have too fast-paced an experience. So basically, we're going to do this 20 times. We're going to ask for the home item and have a little bit of a snooze in between for well under the average that I'm hoping for. So the plan is that the moving average starts at being 10 seconds, and then every time I do a request with approximately 100 milliseconds in between, the average will be, of course, moved in the direction. So first time it will almost half, and then it will get closer and closer, and all of a sudden it will break under the 1000 millisecond barrier, and then hopefully we should see some denied. Shall we just go for it? Drum roll? No? Right. So you can see it's counting there, and it's too quick. I should have made it a longer sleep. So that everyone can see, we'll take an instant replay. All the way from, well, not all the way, but from request number 4 and 5 was fine. 6, 7, 8, and I think it's up around 12. Request number 10, the server became agitated after that and said, hang on, stop, and wouldn't have it anymore. Of course, now it's a lot longer than 10 seconds ago that we did it last time, so I should be able to run it one more time. And the first couple of ones are okay, and then all of a sudden it bumps up and says, hey, hang on, this is too much. So that was one example of how you could extend the item API. I think actually this is quite useful. I could imagine it being useful in not necessarily for item API, but for a lot of other, well, let me say, any time you want to do a REST service, this come in handy, especially if you are planning on serving stuff to, let's imagine that you wanted to do a fancy swishing jQuery sliding menu thing that talks JSON to your server, and someone had a look at it and said, that looks very, that data is just what I need. I've always wished for this sort of menu. I'll use that on my website. I don't know. I make it up as I go along. But then something like this could perhaps come in handy. What do you think? Does anyone have any other ideas to what we should implement right now as an extension to the API? I'll do it. No? Okay. Then,
What caching do you use?
Did someone say something?
Use caching.
Um,
Standard caching.
It uses the standard caching in the part of the API that we'd normally expect. So, of course, there's no HTML cache yet, but it does use the normal cache layers. So it's not bypassing the Sitecore API as such. It's just a layer on top of that. So the question, just for the benefit of the camera, the question was if it uses caching. Any other? Let's hang on. I've got one more slide. I'm not gonna miss out on this one. Hang on. There we are. And last slide. There we are. Thanks for listening. You can contact me on my email, kg@sitecore.net, or on Twitter, Herskind UK, for all your flame comments. I assume there'll be a lot of them after you've been on my GitHub repository. And as you can see, just for those of you who are not using Git, it's a topic that we have in the office at the moment. If you're not into skateboarding, download the zip. If you are all for freestyling, then no old people. Fork my GitHub repository and do something cool with it. Yeah. Any questions? There's lots of questions down here. Let's start.
Are you going to be supporting anything like content negotiation, where you could, instead of sending JSON, send out XML?
So are we going to have something similar to this API that talks XML rather than JSON? I believe that we already have some web services that can do a lot of this stuff. Especially if you look at the stuff that's being used for Sitecore Rocks, it has a web service that it talks to that will fill most of your needs. Was that a question? Did that answer your question? I think actually, to be short and blunt, no. I think we already have something that fills those shoes.
This is for all the media items. All the items.
That was a good question there. Something media items. I actually have a demo of this that we missed. You thought you were free there. How long the time?
Couple of minutes.
Okay. So yeah, I did write a lot of demo stuff for this. So look at the line above here. Create example, create media item, and this is where the pizza came in. We're at Pizza Express today. I thought it was so appropriate. Has anyone seen my Sitecore pizza? Okay, well, this is your opportunity. So let's just do like this. go to definition. So when creating a media item, I found a little bit of a balancing act. And again, the documentation is vague on detail. It's basically just said it's a post request. You have to set the name and use multi-part form data. You're on your own. And I spent a lot of time on Stack Overflow learning how to do multi-part form data post requests, which is boring and well, what can I say? Well, I'll put together an example so you don't have to go through the page. So if you just needed to create some media items, then you can use this example code. Shall we just walk through it quickly? Get rid of this down here. Can everyone see? No, Raoul is shaking his head. I'm not going to zoom in because that was a little bit crazy before. So on the top, set up a request, and in that request, I just specify the name of the item I want to create. So I think in this example, I used the name pizza. It will do a unique name, so if an item already exists with that, it'll do the same name and add a space 1 or 2, or it'll start counting. Then you create a boundary marker, that's something specific for multi-part form data. Again, set credentials, say that we're doing a post, keep alive true, perhaps. I don't know, you can try it without. So write the boundary, and then you write a header for the part that you're about to stream, and then that's followed by the stream basically reading in whatever binary file it is that you have. Then shuffling it from one buffer to another buffer, followed by a trailer, which is almost like a boundary, except that it's different it's ridiculous by these two characters. That tripped me up. And then we just send the request. So I'm going to need Sitecore Rocks again, because it's a lovely thing to work with. So I'm just going to check that there's nothing on the media library except for the things that are there by default when you install Sitecore. And then we'll go into the program here and hope for the best. I'm going to run. Oh, there's a breakpoint there. I was probably debugging my boundary. Oh, dear Lord, operation not allowed. I knew that would happen. That was actually a demo fail. I didn't mean for this to happen. But luckily, as we visited this file a couple of times during the presentation, it's no problem. We'll just get rid of this and take that out. So the point here is, of course, allow read write. Just give Sitecore a chance to wake up. And back to the program. And 5. 5. Is the program running, or? Oh, it's waiting for me. Sorry. As usual, we're waiting for Mr. Nightingale. Okay. So already here I can see that my the last demo went really well. You can see some dimensions here, and if we move up, you can see that the file name was transferred correctly, and the name of the item looks right, and it's an unversioned image. One important thing to note is that media items created through the Item API can only be unversioned. So I don't know how many use versioned media items. I find that aspect can often trip up the editors, just putting that extra piece of complexity into their daily lives that will break them. So back to the Sitecore Rocks Explorer, and fingers crossed. Well, I've seen the JSON side nodes here. Can you see my little pizza? We'll see, perhaps it gets bigger here. Slightly bigger here. That was a pizza I created a while ago for lunch with pepperoni. And I think I'll end my... are there any more questions, or are we just... Am I just rambling now? Nervous laughter, he's just rambling. Yeah, have a look at this. Look at this. This is soon. Soon? Oh, that's not the button then. Right, thank you very much for listening and being patient with me. I'll take one more question, even if it's when they're going to leave. No? Thank you very much.